Everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for your patience as we get organized. People are still coming in. If people would like seats, there's a couple seats up here. And the translation pieces are still happening a little bit. But we want to go ahead and get started. This is an official board meeting. We welcome everyone. Thank you for coming. We have a little bit of board logistics stuff that we need to do to call the meeting to order. So it is 6:14. We'll go ahead and call the open session to order. And we will kick it off with the Pledge of Allegiance. And is Mr. Dennis? Mr. Dennis, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? And can we have...
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Dennis, and for having us at your school site. Many families, this might be your first time at San Rafael High School, and maybe your son or daughter will be here in the future. All right, as part of official board business, we all have a time now for public comment for anything that is not on the agenda. If anyone would like to speak to anything, this would be an opportunity to do it. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. This is for the board, where we have items that we will just have had an opportunity to review in advance. And if all is good, we will do the consent agenda. So any items, we have consent agenda for capital facilities program consent agenda. And we do have all the board members here, Natutu Atailoa, Linda Jackson, Greg Nell.
I'll move approval.
Micah, where's Micah? Micah, sorry. Micah Portman-Scotty. Greg, you have first on the second by Linda. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, that agenda passes. Consent agenda passes. Next consent agenda has one item. Any questions? First by Natu. Second by Linda. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, that is it on official business. Thank you. And now, we move to the board workshop. So, just in terms of our agenda this evening, we did start a few minutes late, but we're going to get right to the meat of our evening. We're going to talk about the facility work moving forward, just some background on that. Review of the previous workshops and input received. Many of you participated in one or both of those workshops, and we thank you for your input and your time coming out to work on this really, really important and exciting work. It's great to be here, and it's time to be able to talk about all this. We're going to talk about the goals of our program maps. And then we're going to share with you the program maps for both the elementary district and the high school district. We'll have then a group discussion and a share out that's very comparable to what we did at the other two workshops. Each workshop we've had more and more people, so we're going to work through that, and we appreciate your patience as we're learning as we're going. All right, and then we'll also be talking about our next steps. So if I can hand it over to Dr. Wattenpop.
Thanks, Rachel. Kind of like a mini-series, and we're in episode 3 today. So we've met 2 other times for our facilities workshop, and tonight we're hoping that we can demonstrate the progress that we've made over the last 2. And so we've started each of our presentations with the slides behind me, lifting student achievement every student every day, because we really believe that our facilities serve the educational program. And we're in a really great spot because the voters of this community passed the bond measures, both measures A and B, and we now have dollars to do facility modernization improvements across the district. We're in a good place. And hopefully after this evening, we'll have a better idea of how the map's going to look like in terms of how we move forward with the project. So tonight we're hoping to really look at a map of our facilities program. And when we think about a map, we think about what's the best route to get somewhere. And so we've been looking at things from a numeric and fiscal perspective. We've been looking at things from a logistical perspective in terms of what makes sense to do first. For example, if we were going to tear down a building at a particular school site, but it's at the back of the campus and we're going to do work at the front of the campus, it doesn't make sense to do the tear down in the back first. So we're looking at what makes sense fiscally, logistically, programmatically, because we also need to figure out where we're going to house kids while we're doing modernization and construction. So we're going to be looking at program maps for both the elementary district and the high school district. What you saw hopefully last time was we developed a series of scenarios based on the feedback we got from you the first workshop. Tonight you'll see a different modification of what we got feedback from the last workshop, and hopefully you'll see that this evening. So, just to kind of remind you, at the first meeting we met at Venetia Valley, we went through priorities and parameters. We then moved to Davidson and we looked at some of the program map options, and we heard a lot of feedback from some school sites about how come my school can't move further or earlier in the progression than later. And so good feedback around that. Tonight we're at the consensus program map piece where we're really hoping that we get consensus of the group so that on April 18th, the Board of Education can take action to begin planning for those projects. Because what needs to happen after we develop the maps are, we have to begin identifying architects who begin working with school communities to develop the specifics of what those projects look like. Those plans will take at least a year. So we're looking at construction really not to be able to begin until the summer of 2017. But if we miss the window in the spring, our construction date will be postponed even later. So our goal really is the 18th. So let's kind of revisit how did we get here. So about 24 months ago, we began the process of looking at our facilities. We evaluated every facility to determine, do we need modernization or do we need to tear the thing down and start over? Which was going to be the most cost effective? And we did that for both the elementary district and the high school district. And what we identified was in the elementary district, we had $273 million of need. $273 million. In the high school district, we had $181 million of need. So that told us, yeah, we definitely have some facilities issues. So the next piece was really looking at, the board decided to go out and ask the voters to fund that modernization work. When you go out for bonds, there's only a certain level of bonding capacity that your property tax values allow. In the elementary district, we were able to raise $108 million. So think back, 273 million, 108. Big difference in the need of the dollars. High school district, we were able to raise 161 million, very close to the 181 million that we identified as need. So that happened. Now we're going through these program maps, looking at how we're going to organize or prioritize the projects. The board made a very specific decision to go out to the community and seek your input and feedback on how to order the projects. They could have just made the decision themselves. Ultimately, they will make the decision, but they will have done it after having these 3 workshops and getting significant amount of input. So you've seen that each of the 3 sessions, we've been revising the maps based on the feedback we've been getting, and then putting dollars and cents to it to what makes sense. So we're going to keep moving, and our next goal really is that April 18th board meeting, where we're hoping that we bring to the board for approval the program maps that would be the program plan for the next 3 years, based on the issuance and the sale of the bonds. And that's what we're hoping that the site project work, because once the projects are identified, the board will identify architects, assign them to the school site, and then the school site, being led by the principal, will determine what are the walls going to look like, what are the doors going to look like, what colors are going to be, what are the windows going to look like. All of those specific details are going to be done with the architect at the school site, with parents, with teachers, with kids, and members of the community. So that's not going to happen at this meeting. That's going to happen at the site level where those projects get rolling. So we keep checking off the boxes here. And as you look here, these are the things that we've gone through. We really began with the district's strategic plan for our educational program, because that really guides what we need our facilities for. So we've identified what kinds of facilities we need, we've gotten community input, we developed a long-range facilities plan, we adopted the facilities plan, and we began looking at, so how do we structure the debt? Because while we can raise $108 million in bonds, we have to sell the bonds, and we have to spend those dollars within a 36-month period. So we have to plan the bond issuances in a way that the money is committed so that the bonds can be spent and projects can be done. So we've impaneled our Citizens Oversight Committee. We have an oversight committee that will oversee all of the projects to make sure that the district is using the funds based on how the voters approve them to be done. And that panel has been seated. And we're now at the point right now where we're refining the program maps. And that's where we're gonna need your help tonight. Tonight could be like a celebration, a party, could be really fun, if we get consensus on where we're going. So that's what we're really hoping to do, because we want to be able to turn the projects over to the school sites so that you can get your hands even dirtier and help decide what it's going to look like at your school sites. All right, I'm going to ask Sarah to help with this slide.
To do all of this, we have to establish an engine to run this program. So that involves some internal staff that are being hired right now. There's a position being flown now for the senior director and various people that will help manage and run and track all of this work. The next slide shows what happens at the site level. Once we have consensus on the program map, then we need to push the design and detailed decision making down to the sites. That requires a team of specialists that help at that point as well. So each site will have an architect, project manager, construction managers, and all of those work together to plan out and work with the site to plan out the design details. And Christina is going to talk about all of the input that we got in the last 2 work sessions on prioritization.
Yes, thanks, Sarah. So Dr. Juan Paul walked through the overall high level of what happened at each workshop. So I'm happy to share with you the results of the feedback that a lot of you were a part of. So we started with this list of givens, which we know we need to do. We don't want, that's not up for debate. Those are things that need to happen as part of this program. But then there was this other larger list of priorities that we needed input on to help us guide shaping these program maps. So through the community, through the first workshop, and then through the online surveys and paper surveys that have been available, we've asked people in the school community to help us prioritize and get to the top 7. Through that, also part of the workshop, we had group discussion. We asked the group members to think like a board after they ranked the priorities individually. So if they were approaching the entire district, what priorities might change and how they consider that. And of course, we had the online surveys as well. So as a result, we've had over 230 people give input on what these priorities would look like. And again, these are the priorities that are shaping the program map. So your priority feedback is directly shaping these maps. We had a range of students, parents, staff, and teachers, and community members participate in this process, with every school being represented. This is a count to show how many people voted for something in the top 10. So STEAM obviously rises to the top as the top vote getter, and then it's pretty clear that there's a lot of conversation about what the other top priorities could be. But when we actually rank them by what rose to the top, this is up to date with, we presented this at the last workshop, but it takes into account the new results from the survey up to the last hour. To what shaped the plan. And so we see that STEAM is on top for both of those, followed by those other priorities. And I'll ask Sarah again to talk a little bit about solar, because we had the opportunity to write in and make comments. And one of those things, one of the items that was referenced a lot was solar, and we think that's important to give a few words to.
The answer to solar is yes. And here are the steps to getting to yes. First of all, we need some funding, because as you have noticed, maybe the monies left for construction are fairly tight in both of these programs. So what we want to do is find public-private partnerships that produce a really good return on investment for solar. Those are doable, but you do have to compare them. You can't just grab the first one that comes along. Also, so number one, we're looking for that funding to leverage any investment that we make. But number two, we don't want to put solar structures, shade structures in the parking lot and then drive construction trucks over the top of those. That doesn't make any sense. Another thing that the solar companies typically want is more of the bigger the scale, the better the return on investment. So since our sites aren't ready for it, we are stalling on negotiating and looking at solar things until we have the sites sequenced. Doesn't make sense to do construction and drive over the top of that. So the answer is yes, that is definitely a part of what the district will be looking for, that we're looking for ways to leverage it, and we're looking for ways to make sense with the sequence of construction projects.
Great, thanks. And to wrap up solar, I think as I'm here to talk about the feedback, I think it's important to note that the solar feedback came primarily from high school students. So that shapes how we're thinking about this plan and the different audiences that we're including and what rises to the top with the different audiences. And then I spoke about the first workshop when the groups worked together to think like a board, what their consensus rankings would be, and these are what rose to the top today. Moving on to our second workshop, last week, we showed different program scenarios and asked for feedback on those. And we used somewhat of a checkmark system where we asked people to look at the scenarios and compare them to those priorities that have been identified by the community to see if they match. We asked people to check plus if they exceeded, if they met the priority. We asked them to check it if it moderately met the priority or minus if it didn't meet the priority. So you can see those results of the tallies of the number of people that indicated those items. We don't need to spend too much time here, but you'll see that scenario A, if you remember, that was the scenario that didn't meet our budget requirements, which was 17 million over in budget. And I'm going to pass this over to Marcus Hipser to talk about some of the other feedback that we received. We had, most of the opportunity was discussing advantages and disadvantages of the different scenarios, so Marcus will be able to talk about the summary comments that we received.
Thank you very much. It's really exciting to be at this point. I've been working on this for over 2 years now, and to see us so close is really great. So I really appreciate everybody being here, and I really appreciate the district allowing me to be part of this process. So I just wanted to say that at the gate. So as a result of the conversation that we had at the last meeting, we presented one scenario for the high school district and 3 different scenarios for the elementary school district as we looked at the scoring earlier. And some of the advantages and disadvantages sort of rose to the top in terms of the comments that we received. This is the high school district here. And really, as the superintendent mentioned earlier, the funding and the need at the high school district is not that far apart. Well, unfortunately for the elementary district, we're a little bit different. But so the focus of the advantages and disadvantages is really around what's in the individual master plans themselves. So it's sort of getting into the detail of it. But really, there wasn't a lot of conversation about changing things at the overall program level. It was really about let's get into the details and start working on these. So some of the advantages, keeping the library, and they like having air conditioning early. Disadvantages, they wanted a little bit more information about STEAM. So when we get to the elementary district, really we're looking at the advantages and disadvantages of the 3 scenarios that were presented, and the major disadvantage in option A was that it was over budget by a significant margin. Although it did cover a lot of the schools in the district, there was that really big problem to it, so they effectively that one got slashed. Scenario B was still, we were looking at a lot of the schools getting benefit. It was very close, if not right on the budget. It was a little bit over the last time we presented it. We're going to look at a little bit more today, but we're a little bit closer even. Some of the schools weren't included, that was a disadvantage, and then multi-purpose rooms were needed sooner than we had shown them in the plan, and we tried to resolve some of that. We'll talk about that in a minute. Option C, or the scenario C that was presented, 3 schools saw significant improvement. So there was really a lot of work done at 3 campuses, but basically we were leaving a lot out. There are many schools not included, parity not met, which is a real critical issue, option C. The consensus ultimately was that option B was what we should be pursuing, so we're going to talk a little bit about that, more about that in a minute. But one of the goals that we have for these program maps, as we're calling them, this is really our roadmap to the future for the overall program, is to make sure that we meet certain criteria, the parameters that we're working with. We talked a little bit about them before, but I'll just kind of remind you about some of them. Balancing the budget, that's pretty clear. We can't spend any more money than we already have. The district will continue to look for additional funding sources, but by and large, the major funding source for schools and construction in California is a local bond. We passed that bond, we have that money. We will continue to look for more, as Sarah talked about, public-private partnerships, but that's going to be a small amounts, and right now we need to make sure we're balanced going into this program and not expecting to get more money than we already have. Responding to priorities. We heard a lot about priorities, particularly at the first workshop that we had, and we're trying to make sure that these scenarios that were presented are trying to reach those as best as possible. We have to be flexible for fluctuations in enrollment. There are current overcrowding needs at a number of different campuses, but making sure that the plan is flexible enough that we can make adjustments as we go if the enrollment projections start to change. Staggering programs and functions, this is particularly relevant to the high school district. We cannot have the central kitchen down here on this campus in McCall High School at the same time as the kitchen is down at Terra Linda High School. Likewise, the auto shop cannot be down here at the same time that the auto shop is down at Terra Linda High School. So there's a balancing and a sequencing that has to take into account a lot of the operational functions of the district. The scenarios that we're showing include management. There's a lot of management that goes into it. You heard Sarah talk about the overall program and how we're implementing it, the project directors, construction managers, project managers, architects, on and on and on. All those are embedded in the plans that you see. Plus escalation. Escalation is a really big one. We think about escalation as, some people think of it as inflation. We're really looking at 4.5% per year. So if you analyze that over time, you think 8 years, that's actually quite a high percentage, which is why some of the dollars change from, if we move the project from year 3 to year 5 or year 8, the dollars are going to go up because of that escalation. All that has to be balanced in this overall program. We wanted to fit it in about 8 years. It's about the bond sale schedule, and the sooner we can get it done, number one, the less escalation we have, and number two, the best benefit we get out of it. So we want to make sure all this stuff is balanced, along with the cash flow that goes along with that. And we're also accounting for swing space and sequencing. There's some campuses, Davidson, Benicia Valley in particular, they have large programs on their campuses, and projects need to be done in a certain order in order to make sure that the campus can still function and that we don't spend money on swing space when we could be putting it into permanent programs. Now, Chu was going to jump in here for a minute and just remind us why we're all here.
Thank you, Marcus. All right, let's get ready to rumble. Yeah, some smiles out there. My name is Natu Tuatagaloa. I've been on the board since 2001. I attended Glenwood Preschool, San Pedro Elementary School, Santa Benicia Middle School, and Sanford High School. My wife went to Coleman, Davidson, and Sanford High. More importantly, my children went to San Pedro, Coleman, Davidson, and Sanford High School. I have 2 here currently, a freshman and a senior. So we are, as a family, deeply invested in our community, and I think that's why we're here. Just a show of hands really quick, how many kids are out here? Raise your hand. If you're a kid out there, raise your hand. Let's see. You young adults and children. All right, that's why we're here. We're here because of you. How many parents are here? Raise your hand. That's incredible. That's the most parents I've seen at a board meeting in years. Awesome. How many staff members are here if you work at a school site? That's also incredible. Look at that. Parents and staff members. You know, it's awesome. How about district people? How many people are here in the district? Raise your hand. That's great. I want to let you know that this is my second go-around with modernization bond funds and programming. It is not an easy task, but
It's a great task because what it means is, as Dr. Wattenpaw said, the voters of this community believe in public education. They believe in modernizing our sites and making things better for our kids. Now, the staff, I'd like to recognize them because the amount of work that they've had to do in such a short period of time has been incredible. The last time we did this, we didn't have that luxury. This time we've got a lot of forethought. We've built an incredible spreadsheet with Sarah. We've looked it over with Chris Thomas and facilities. We've talked to Marcus. The board members have had a look. We've had community feedback. That's an incredible process to be in a position where we are to make decisions based on the feedback and based on what's possible. Remember why you're here. This is about what our kids need, which means not everyone's going to get what they want, but it's about what they need. And remember, this is an exciting time. Everyone here is going to pay the price for our kids going forward. The best we can do is give the best input and work collaboratively and really work together to try to get the best solution we can for all our kids. Right? That's what we're here for. We're here for all our kids. From the kindergartners all the way to the high schoolers, we're here for all our kids. So I want to say thank you from me, my family, and the board and the district staff. And again, I really applaud you for being here because your involvement makes the difference in how we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to jump right into the scenarios. This is what we've all come to really talk about. I know it's a lot of numbers on a piece of paper, or on a screen rather. There will be pieces of paper that are passed out a while later so you can get a closer look at them. But effectively, this is the same scenario that was presented at the last workshop. The reason there is no change to the dollars, there's one small change to this, and I'll point out in a second, but the reason there's no change in the overall dollars is because of the feedback that we got from the individual campuses. Those campuses on the high school, this is the high school. The high school group, they broke up into a Carolina group and a San Rafael group, even though we asked them to mix up, but that was fine. They really started getting into the weeds and the details, and that's frankly the recommendation that we're making is that we push forward because a lot of the work that they need to get done is going to get done in this overall plan. We're starting at San Rafael High School with the stadium project, which has been ongoing, and then there are a variety of power projects that follow. Again, at Terra Linda, we're starting with air conditioning in year 2 at the classroom building, and then a number of projects follow. It's the same schedule that we showed at the last meeting. There's a lot of interconnectivity between a lot of these things. I touched on that before. Auto shop, making sure that there's compatibility there. The main kitchen, making sure that we don't have both of them down at the same time. But effectively, this is the plan that we presented, and we think it's a good one, and we've got a lot of good feedback about it. The only change that we made to the spreadsheet, didn't change the plan, and it doesn't change the scope or the budget, is that we showed that the district office, we pulled that out as a separate line item. It was buried, because it's part of Terra Linda campus, we had buried it in there. But just as Madrone is part of San Rafael High School campus, we had that as a separate line item. We want to show that we're really putting that here at the end to give the entire program some flexibility not to do that. The district staff have said, you know what, we're gonna throw ourselves on the sword if we need to in order to save the program for money for kids. So there is some work that is already getting started in terms of the overall maintenance and operations within the district. Chris is going to talk about that.
So what you're going to find out is that, yes, the bond program is going to be gearing up, but it doesn't mean we're not going to stop. It doesn't mean we're not going to stop doing our regular routine maintenance projects that we do every single summer. And so, as we saw last summer, we installed 3 portable classrooms out here on the blacktop for San Rafael High School. We're going to be continuing to do those types of projects. We're looking at exterior painting projects. We're looking at more portable projects. And so maintenance and operations will continue to move forward, and you'll start seeing things happen just from that perspective, probably at a greater level. So anyway, we just want to reassure people that that work will start in this summer of 16, even though the major bond projects won't really start until summer of 17. I'll go into more detail on that.
Speaking of the elementary district, so we got a lot of really good feedback at the last workshop. We presented 3 scenarios. The scenarios were scenario A, scenario B, scenario C, and I talked a little bit about the advantages, disadvantages, and what the general consensus was. Now, what this shows is a modification of scenario B. And what this does is it resolves some of the issues that we received, some of the comments that we received at that workshop. I'm going to walk you through some of the detail of this, and then we're going to look at another scenario that's very similar but has some distinct differences to it. So we heard loud and clear. Just real quickly. Again, just to remind everybody, what is happening in this scenario is balancing cash flow. You can see here at the bottom, if there's a red number, that means that this amount of money has been overspent. Now, $65,000 in a program that's $121 million is something that can be managed as we get into the details. But generally speaking, these numbers really can't go below 0. We also needed to manage screen space. And we had to manage sequencing. We talked about Davidson and Benicia Valley needing some sequencing to make sure that that all the projects could be done in a particular order. That some of that work needs to be done. There's some flexibility there. And then we also wanted to make sure that we're looking at the priorities that were identified by the community at the first workshop, and embed those in the scenario that has been presented here. This scenario tries to do that. Tries to make sure that all of those priorities, including parity, including multi-purpose, and some of those others, are taken into account. So we've heard first from a number of different sources was Bahia Vista really needed a lunch shelter. And the lunch shelter for Bahia Vista is only $150,000. It was fairly easy to find a way to get into the program by moving some things around and making sure that we didn't have, it basically was a modification of the cash flow. That's how we were able to manage it. We heard at Glenwood, we heard a lot of feedback that why is Glenwood getting the same amount every time? I think the general feeling was that Glenwood was getting their entire master facility plan developed while everybody else had to make cuts and concessions. When the truth is that the entire master plan for Glenwood is $23 million with a variety of different projects and buildings. So that all that Glenwood is getting is their multi-purpose building, which is important. It was one of the major priorities identified in that first workshop. But wanted to make sure that that was clear, because I know that was a concern from some people. San Pedro, there was a lot of concern at the last meeting that San Pedro was out toward the end, and hey, we're going to get cut again because you're going to run out of money. We agree that it's a very important project, and it's making sure that we have parity throughout the district. So that what this scenario does is it allows us to move San Pedro up. And right now, a lot of this work is in what we call year 3. Right now we're in year 1. We're going to be doing design work in year 2, and then these projects can all go into construction at the same time. Short, there was a lot of concern about, Short is getting less money than their original master plan was identified, and it was a concern by a number of people, not just Short parents, but short parents and teachers, but a variety of people in the group, which is really great about those workshops, because there were a number of people looking out for each other. I really appreciated that about the overall comments. We wanted to clarify that what these dollars do for Short is it gives them 4 classrooms, gives them a multi-purpose building, gives them a library, modular construction, and some additional money for site improvement. So they actually get the parity that we were looking for the rest of the district. It won't be a complete campus rebuild, but it is providing that ability for that campus to have 12 classrooms, to have an equivalent multi-purpose building, and a fully functioning library. Davidson, there was some question about why is Davidson getting air conditioning? Why is that important? Davidson has a lot of students, and they do have summer schools, so they're operating in some of the hottest months of the year. Davidson folks would tell you that it's extremely important for them to have air conditioning, so which is why we left that in, or that's been left in the scenario. And that's about all the feedback we got. The scenario is identified now for Davidson. This project goes first. Now there is a sequencing at Davidson that needs to be followed. There was a concern that the Davidson multi-purpose building was too late in the overall program. That this building, this 2-story building, should be maybe swapped with the multi-purpose. The reason that it's not in this scenario is that two-story classroom building does a few things. First of all, it accommodates some of the overcrowding on the campus by providing additional classrooms. It also provides the new science classrooms that are needed when you build this multi-purpose building. You are demolishing the existing science wing. So if we flop those, then you would have to provide temporary housing for those science classrooms at a cost of somewhere around $1.5 million. So it makes more sense to us to make sure that that money went into permanent classrooms than temporary classrooms. At Venetia Valley, a lot of this work is still here at the end on this particular scenario. You can see that this is a very large building here. There are pieces to this, and we'll talk about how those pieces can be broken out in a minute. There's a steam expansion and the parking and drop-off. That's one of the critical issues to that campus is the traffic and the parking is a real nightmare on that street. And getting that resolved early is something that seems to be important. Plus, steam was one of the highest priority items within the feedback that we've been receiving. So that's why these two projects, the steam and the parking and drop-off, are here up front. We start to do the classroom work here in year 5, and then we finish with a new gym and the replacement classroom building here in year 8. Part of the reason, again, is that this is late is that you can see the dollars here. This is almost a $36 million piece. To move this up front would take almost the entirety of both of these bond issuances. Here's $25 million, and then here's 28. So a lot of that money gets sucked up, and then all these projects we've got. To affect the most number of classrooms, the most number of campuses, the most number of students early on in the program, this does that by leaving some of this work to the end. But there's an option. I'm going to skip right to that option. Is that okay? Yeah. Laureldale, we haven't modified Laureldale from the last, but Laureldale has a replacement campus, and that is still included in this plan.
Maybe you could talk about the timing of Laureldale short in relation to swing space and what can
Sure. One of the other things that this manages is Laureldale in year 3 and Short in year 5. Now I want to point out that this is as sophisticated as a spreadsheet that this is. It is in some ways a very crude tool. If you imagine a nearly $14 million project, there's going to be about a year of design work. So some of this money is going to be spent here. There's going to be construction work that goes probably beyond a year. So some of this money will be spent there. Really what this does is identifies the midpoint of that project so that we can make sure that the cash flow is analyzed on a conceptual basis. So as this project, as Laureldale gets built, they're going to need to move somewhere. And the current concept is that they move to the Davidson Annex for the duration of their construction. That would also be the location of swing space for Short Elementary School, which is why these are in separate years, so that we can make sure that we maintain the ability to have quote-unquote free swing space and not build temporary housing. If the district even had a parcel where they could build a temporary campus, which they don't, unless you want to go way out to Rafael, which doesn't seem like a very good option. That's probably why these two are separated for 2 years. So what this scenario does, this is scenario B3. So the other is B2. We presented B at the last meeting, and then B3 here at the beginning. Yes, question? Sure. Glenwood is going to get a new multi-purpose building. They currently have a building that they call multi-purpose, but it is filled with site programs, so they don't have a multi-purpose building. one of the priorities that was identified by the group. That was one of the projects that rose to the top, was the multipurpose building in Glenwood. The reason it's the same amount is that it's consistently in year 3. Some of these amounts change because if I had moved this from year 3 to year 4, the escalation that we talked about before, that would increase the budget, or the cost. If I moved it to year 2, it would decrease the cost. So a lot of these other projects have moved from year to year, which is why the numbers keep changing. That's that escalation factor. The reason this one continues to stay the same is because it hasn't moved. It's continually stayed in year 3. Part of the reason it stays in year 3 is that with the size of the project, about $3.6 million, it fits within the cash flow. It's easier to move this project around from year to year because it's relatively small in the overall program. Sure. Yeah, of course. Natu asked the question of what is the overall master plan. It was originally included in the overall master plan formula. And the overall master plan includes the replacement of a number of portable classrooms in the permanent classroom building, providing some additional classrooms. The kindergartens are currently in standard classrooms, which are smaller and they don't have dedicated restrooms, so we were providing those as part of that master plan. It was renovations of the playground and some other, and then coming back to the old multipurpose building and renovating that for a library, converting and expanding the administration into what is now the library. So it was a whole sequence of projects that were originally slated for Glenwood. What they're getting is just the multipurpose building.
Is possible change this project? Why? Because for our school, short school, it's very less time. We need a cafeteria, library, and I listen the other schools. Wow, we need one. Our children we need a library, we need a cafeteria. We could eat outside in the hallway.
Benicia Valley, and I went there with my daughter because there was a soccer game there. And it was really heartbreaking for me when we got there and my daughter saw the library and she told me, oh my God, they have a library! We are in the same school district. So it's really heartbreaking for me and all of the parents to know that we have been through 5 years without any library, without any other spaces.
I'm going to ask Chris Thomas, our chief business official, to respond to your question. First of all, one of the things that there are very few schools in the district that have covered eating areas where kids eat inside. The majority of children eat inside or in classrooms in the grade throughout the whole district. So that's not unique. In terms of the library, we have a plan this summer to renovate the chalet to put a library at Short in the interim.
Yes, so actually, once this slide, really quickly, this slide. So again, we talked about the district, we have some maintenance projects scheduled for the summer. In the elementary district, we actually have quite a few projects that we're looking at. I'll start with Short since that's the first question. We've actually already worked with Vanessa for our Kids at Short to come up with a list of books that are currently on order for the library. So the library's going to get new library books. We're working on getting bookshelves in Chalet so the Chalet can be converted into a library. And so right now, as a temporary library, we're already working on that. We're also looking at doing site work around the campus in order to maximize some of the play spaces that right now aren't suitable for play area. Going to some of the other campuses, we've got a lot of exterior paint projects planned for the summer
at Sun Valley, for example, we're looking at their elevator building, adding exterior paint and repairs to that, putting in a paved pathway in front of the two-story building, because right now the kids are walking through mud and dirt. We're looking at doing a new play structure at Bahia Vista, because we know we've got 3 play structures that are getting older. We're looking at replacing a kinder play structure at Glenwood, because we have one that we can relocate to that. And we only have 4 play structures in the entire district that still have that bark material instead of the poured in place. So we're looking at continuing to replace all of those play structures in Glenwood and Bahia Vista as the campuses like Glenwood. So we have a lot of summer projects planned. We know that we cannot quickly build a new library building at Short, but we certainly can do a good job trying to set up a library that the kids can have access to books and areas to read those books.
If you allow me to speak, what you are saying is right. We understand that every single school has its particular challenges and needs, but what you can see from, my name is Erika, and I have 2 daughters at Short School, elementary school, and our situation is very difficult, because what you guys are saying is that there will be 3 more buildings, 3 more classrooms in our schools. Our campus is the smallest one in the entire school district, and you know that. Now I'm trying to say that if you don't even have a playground already, you remove that from our school last year, and we still not have one. And right here, in this paper, which is on my information, there is on 2013, when you came to our campus, the council and the school, you mentioned that the recommendation was to replace the entire building, because this one is not able to allow, to contain appropriately the kids from kinder to 5th grade. We are now a kinder to 5th grade, and our support is and what you guys are doing, according to my notes, is just bringing more classrooms and more classrooms. And not more like
And I certainly appreciate your perspective. No, and we certainly appreciate that, honestly. But I think if you look around all of our campuses, you will notice that we have numerous portables at each one of our campuses. Laurel, Delta, and Rample has 5 buildings, 5 classrooms in actual buildings, and then we have 5 portables. So of the 9 classrooms that Laurel has, 4 of them are in classroom portable buildings. If you look at San Pedro, if you look at Glenwood, if you look at Coleman, even we put portables, if you look at Veneta Valley. Absolutely, and we understand that.
my concern here is that you guys are not doing, as well as kind of making up a little bit of change on it. But when is this gonna come? Because you guys promised that when you came to propose expansion. And when we say yes to the expansion, we also say yes to the improvement of the building. And as far as I can see right here, you guys are not completing our building. And in that case, why our kids have to be taking classes? In the beginning, you guys had a playground there. How is it gonna be possible that our kids have to search for if they don't have the facilities?
And I appreciate that. I want to take a few other questions.
I think that at this point, I am a mom from Lauderdale, and my son went to Short School when they just opened. And I think that we are not right now, Short and Lauderdale, we are not talking about or against Glenwood or Backyard. It's not that these, the parents of that children don't take it like that's what we have. The only thing is that we are seeing that you are proposing to build a multi-purpose room for them, because they have everything over there, when we have everything in the multi-purpose at Lauderdale. And Short that they don't have a multi-purpose. So that's the part that we don't understand how to balance. And I understand that you have to give it to all the
Okay, so
schools, but I just want to
person
know,
at a time to talk.
I just want to know why Glenwood keep getting money and
No,
money keeps
Glenwood has not gotten any money
passing
in a
it.
long
Okay, so I
time.
want to,
I am just saying that, and it's not against you. I just want you to understand that our kids are suffering. And the families of Short Short and Lauderdale, we are feeling like our kids are treated like a second class, like we are the ugly dog of the district, and we are not receiving what we need and what
So
our
I'd like
kids
to,
need.
I'd like to refresh everybody's memory, however, because I've been here since 2005. When we were under massive construction at every single one of our school sites. And there was a perception even back then, I know Laurelville was one of the campuses that received very little, absolutely. And you'll notice in the scenario that they are getting a complete rebuild of their campus. And so, honestly, I think that a lot of the priorities looked at the campuses that got the least last time, and they were included as priorities for this time. So I think that you'll see that. I want to take a few more. We also, I think it's also important to remember that we spent about $1.8 million in the last 3 years modernizing Short. So we renovated all of the 6 classrooms and the restrooms in the what we call the pod building. As many of you know, we renovated all of the restroom buildings, and we renovated the administration offices and the 2 classrooms that are adjacent to the administration building. So we did just put $1.8 million into renovating the Short campus, including adding an oversized boardwalk for a temporary multi-use building. None of our campuses, except for our 2 high schools, have a cafeteria. Not one of our campuses have a cafeteria.
We don't need a cafeteria, we need a library.
Yeah,
We need
sir.
a building
Sir,
where
about-
everything can fit properly.
I'm the after-school program coordinator over at Short, so as part of my role, I have to go to all the other sites. And I know that's false, because San Pedro actually has that they have as a cafeteria as well. So,
There, yes,
they do. I'm not trying to nitpick or anything, but I just wanted to piggyback off of their statement that they made. Our chalet is already doubling as our multi-use room where we serve food from and a classroom space. And now it's going to be tripled down as a library space. It just seems like it's another stop there for however many years.
and I think that you're right, it is a stopgap measure, but even if Short's library was gonna happen in year 5, we still have to come up with a temporary solution to make sure that our kids at Short over the next 2 to 3 years, or 3 to 5 years, whatever it's gonna be, have a temporary library facility that they can go and use. So that's what our goal is.
2013, 2021 have been there. How many more years our kids have to wait to have proper restrooms and
I
library?
wanna take a question at a time.
My only concern is everything looks great. My concern is because of our history, we were about to have a brand new double storage building. And couple of schools were built up brand new. Our school was not touched. It was
Claudia.
I'm from Benicia Valley. And my concern is that we're the last ones on the list, and we'll be again on the same position as we were last time. And I have to say, they didn't rebuild our school, they didn't do anything in our school. Our history was, they were gonna build it in the front, they tear down those classrooms, and where our library was going to be, end up being the office. And we lost a big section of our school. Then they add what is right now the middle school. That's all what they have done in our school. Nothing new has been done. And my worry is that this is not going to happen. My daughter will graduate from middle school. She's a 4th grader right now. And nothing will happen again because we're the last ones in the list.
So I think what would be helpful is for Marcus to walk us through the next scenario, because again, these are scenarios, he walked us through the first scenario. Why don't we have him walk us through the next scenario so you can see the potential changes?
Thank you, Chris. So scenario 3, and I appreciate that concern. In fact, that was the same concern we heard about San Pedro after the last meeting, was that San Pedro was toward the end and they're gonna get the short end of the stick. And so this was the scenario we talked about before. This was B2. And here, Benicia Valley does get $5.5 million up front, at least in year 3, which is effectively up front in this whole plan. You can see the amount of money that's spent in year 3. It's over $50 million. So we're still back in the one I already talked about. So then the some of the work happens in year 5, and then the remaining, the lion's share, happens toward the end, as you correctly identified. So what we considered is, how do we balance this? Remember, we're looking at cash flow, and Venetia Valley has by far the largest project identified in the overall program. It's a 2-story classroom building. It replaces a number of existing buildings. The special ed population is better served, and so on and so forth. So the front half, or front portion of this scenario, does the same thing that scenario B2 did. It's still, it has Glenwood, Laurel Dell, San Pedro, Short in Year 5. But what it does is it takes the multi-purpose building, and forgive us, this label is not right. This is new multi-purpose, new building modular, and this is gym, locker, and PE classroom expansion. We were getting feedback up until this morning, and so this label didn't get quite right. This is the gym expansion, the locker room expansion at Davidson, which is sorely needed. They have a ton of students coming in, and they really need to expand that locker room. So that got put into Year 5, and then their new multi-purpose got pushed out to Year 7. What that allowed us to do was to take the new gym at Venetia Valley and move that up from, so this was loaded up in here before. This was $36 million last year, and it allowed us to move the new gym building and then some of the classrooms. We demo some of the classroom wings and do some portable work here up in Year 5. So this provides us an option for moving things around at Venetia Valley. It's a little bit different. What happens is Davidson does need to wait a little bit longer for their multi, but then Venetia Valley gets their flexibility a little bit sooner. Again, there's not a lot of flexibility to take this big building and move it up front without pushing all of this work back, because it just is such a large project. But that's effectively the difference between these two scenarios.
I think also one of the things to keep in mind about Davidson is that we are growing significantly in Davidson. All of that growth that's been happening PK to 5 over the past 8 or 9 years has been hitting Davidson, is going to continue to hit Davidson. So back in about 2006, 2007, Davidson was about 800 students. Now it's over 1,100, pushing 1,200. And it's going to continue to grow consistently 60 to 80 students per year over the next 3 or 4 years. So we need to make sure in this plan that we're providing adequate additional classroom space that house all of those additional students at Davidson Middle School in particular. So that's why this classroom building here, this $12.9 million, is so essential, not just for the swing space, which Mark very accurately talked about. It's a cost-effective building to do up front, but it's also essential for the desperate need for classroom space that Davidson has right now and is going to need in the next few years. So that's part of what we've tried to balance as we've looked at this. Where do we have that overcrowding that exists now, and where is that overcrowding going to continue to get worse? And so I just wanted to kind of clarify, as we look at this, Davidson, that building is essential for many reasons.
The highlighted green, is that the year that it begins construction, and do you anticipate that it goes multi-years, or how does that work?
The highlighted green is the middle of the overall project. So some of it will happen before, predominantly design, and there might be a little bit of construction spilling out on the backside. Every project's going to be a little bit different. $25 million project is going to probably take 18 months to build, and the design time is going to be longer, plan check time is going to be longer. DSA, the Division of State Architect, they review buildings, can take 4 months for a small project, it can take 6 months to 10 months for a large project, depending. Design time likewise can be 6 months for a simple project, can be 12 months for a large complicated project. I would imagine at Venetia Valley, we'd probably spend a good chunk of time at the front making sure that we've got all the parts and pieces right before we started to design individual projects. But I hope that answers your question. It's sort of the middle. Question here and then in front.
I'm a 9-10-year parent at Venetia Valley, and I understand a little about what the restraints are. But as far as a little thing like parking and drop off, if you could break that off and do it next year, there's, in my estimation, there's safety issues there just because of the way the place is designed. The kids have to run across multiple lanes of traffic and parking in the parking lot in order to get their cars to go home. It's an accident looking for a place to happen. And if you could break that piece of the project out and move forward, that would get me very happy.
We definitely take that into consideration. Part of that depends on the CEQA process, because CEQA is going to play a large part in what happens at Benicia Valley, but certainly it's something we can take into consideration. So here and then.
So in your first plan, I think you wanted to, the deficit was 65.
That's 65,000. This is small. If it was 65 million, we would not have left. We would not have shown this to you.
Plan where you move some up front, the two schools left that Valley and Davidson, with a $239,000 deficit, I feel like that might be harder to make up front. And the overall deficit is actually right here. So that's really a cash flow.
This is the big picture. This is a cash flow. This is a year-to-year thing. So in this year, we have this much left in the bank, and this year, we have this much left in the bank, so on and so forth. This is what shows at the very end. So there is a deficit shown. But again, this is a small percentage of the overall program. I don't know what the calculation is, but it's probably a tenth of 1%.
Earlier, you said this would be easier to.
This one actually has a positive 35.
Right.
Yeah.
So that one, so it goes back to my concern that I figured my kids are probably never gonna see this stuff happen, but, at Benicia Valley, but I live there, so I want the best for the school. But it does put our school at risk again, because they're in year 2 before the big change of work.
I completely understand. It's a balancing act. If you're not in year 7, I say you, Benicia Valley, is not in year 7, then a number of other projects are then in year 7. So something has to be in year 7. It's just a matter of what it is. These two scenarios, we believe, manage getting the most of the students touched early on in the program and leave this to the end. I will say now, I wasn't here part of the last bond program. I was part of that, so it's great for me to be able to say, given what I'm hearing. But I have heard a lot about it, and one of the things that the district is really trying hard to do now is think about escalation, which was not necessarily done the last go around. Really trying to put in this overall plan the amount of additional cost it will be between putting a project here and putting a project there, so that some of that is accounted for and there's less likelihood of that happening. I can't make any promises, but if we, the last...
Sarah, talk to the contingencies that are built in, please, because we built in 3 levels of contingency just to address those concerns.
First, let me see. First, one of the limiting factors when we talk about moving things around is if this is like a balloon. If you squeeze one end, the other end is going to bulge, and there's no way around it because you have. Oops. All right. So we have these issuances that we're able to issue because there's tax capacity. And then you have to wait for that capacity to catch back up with assessed value. If we had another hour, I could explain all of that, and then you would all know about compound interest and assessed value. But in any case, we can't make these large lumps of money appear any faster. There's no way. So there's just no way to do that. They might change a little if assessed value in Marin continues to go up at a higher rate than we calculated the bond issuances on. Then you could get that money sooner. So that's the only thing that will change in the cash flow, and those are the only options for changing the cash flow. So if you move something from the end up to the front, then then suddenly this becomes a large red, and that you couldn't overcome. So you would have to move a lot of these projects out to the end because you moved something to the beginning. The other thing to remember is that you can't start these large projects until year 3 because we need to start immediately on design and input on those projects. The CEQA process, the permitting process, which is known as DSA in California, those take quite a bit of time, and so we have to start on that now We couldn't do Benicia Valley tomorrow, even if we wanted to. And even if we had all of the cash up front, we still couldn't do it. It would take at least 18 months before you could break ground. So really, you have to start that work out here. And what that means is there's an accumulation of spare money, and that's why a lot of these smaller projects, you end up moving them forward in order to use up that money. Because if you just leave them hanging out there and you, in effect, have a savings account here, then all of the costs go up dramatically because of escalation. So for us on just doing the math, we're working really hard to get as many projects as we can forward, and as much as we can make this number small and black. That's positive leftover, so we're not overspent. And remember, this is an appropriate instrument for where we are, but it's not detailed. There's a lot more detail to come on it yet in terms of planning and showing actual cash expenditures. But what we need is a general approval of this map, so to speak, before we begin doing all of the detailed work that plots all of that. Does that help? 3 levels of contingency. First of all, we have a program reserve that we set aside, and in this plan, because it is a tight budget. This is hard work, isn't it? Have you noticed that? I think is the most excruciating part of any bond program, is trying to decide how to handle short amounts of funds with large amounts of needs. It's difficult, and if you do one project really well, then you have to ask somebody else to either waive or cancel, or so it puts everybody in a tough position. There's a program reserve that we set aside, and that's right here, and that comes back in at the end of the program and gets spent out here. So this is one of the reasons why you should feel confident that the projects at the end will have funding, because this is held aside, and none of the project managers get to use that money. It's off limits, and it's board authorization only, so that comes in back at the end of the program. The second level of contingency is built into each of these numbers, and there's a 10% construction contingency, but don't start dreaming of extra things on your site. We know that some projects go over budget, some projects go under budget, and we count on that statistically to handle those cost overruns and cost underruns, okay? And that accumulates. So that's the second level of contingency. And then there's a third level that's smaller that we attach to each project. And those are for the extra things that you just can't anticipate. We need an extra sign out here by the entrance. People aren't exactly sure where the crosswalk is. Or a tree over here, our favorite tree looks like it's struggling. We need an arborist to come out here and help us with this thing. So those small things on construction that you need just a little bit for, and that is absolutely site-driven in conjunction with your site committee. So those are 3 levels of contingency. Plus, there is, if we moved one of these projects forward, Marcus already said this, but if we took this project and moved it to year 1, your budget would decrease because it'll cost less in year 1. You follow that? So $1 million project today will be 1.4 out here. So if your project today is worth $1 million and we put you in year 7, it's 1.4 on the chart. Follow that? So escalation is built in, and the sites will be asked to stick with these numbers as budgets. So you don't get to look at this number and spend it if you go over down here. You actually have to design to this budget that's built already here. Does that make sense? Okay.
Can we get 1 and 2 at the end? So here and then there, and then one last thing.
If you look up here at the issuances, if you wanted to do this project here, you would have to wait and stockpile this issuance and this issuance in order to do $35 million project there. So you wouldn't do any of this. All of this would go out here, and this one would move forward.
There will be an opportunity to talk amongst yourselves about this too after we're done with the presentation portion. So I have 1, 2, and then 3, and I think you're 4 and 5. Okay, I'll try to keep track.
We're going to get the process rolling so people have an opportunity to begin working together, and we'll be moving around and answering individual questions with the groups.
Okay, so should we go ahead and do that now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I recognize that there are hands up and there are questions out there, and but we do have more on the agenda that we want to break out into groups, let everybody talk amongst themselves, and there's reporting out so we can hear the consensus opinions. One of the advantages that we've had in the last couple of meetings is that people have gotten together and talked about this amongst themselves and then reported out, just as the board would need to discuss amongst themselves and develop a consensus before they vote on anything. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Sarah, and she's going to describe that process. I had one slide, but I think we'll just skip over it because I think we've covered most of this stuff already.
We'd like to break you into groups, and we're going to give you 3 pieces of paper. One of them is the high school scenario. 2 of them are elementary school scenarios. We'd like you to discuss them in your groups, and the question that we're asking is, are you ready to recommend that the board consider these as roadmaps? It doesn't mean they're detailed. It does mean this guides the program. And remember, what this says is we have planned to look out into the future and accomplish what's on this list. And we've set aside contingency, we've set aside escalation. This is a roadmap that we believe we can do within the issuances that you have. So we've earned that through a lot of math and a lot of hard work, moving pieces and reflecting what all of your input was. So it would be helpful if you break into groups that cross both grade levels and schools, and try to reach consensus on these in those groups and see what you can do with a diversity of groups in each table. Yes. We're thinking that you're together, and here's our thinking. Everybody belongs to a high school, right? So if you're not there yet, you will be. And our thinking is also, if you're in high school now, you once were in elementary or middle school. So, we'd like you to look at the high school plan and see if you're ready to recommend that the board adopts that program now. Then we'd like you to look at the 2 elementary school plans and tell us if either of those, if you're ready to recommend that the board adopts either of the elementary school plans. And why?
I think, again, one of the things we're hoping is that the April 18th board meeting, which is the next regularly scheduled board meeting, is when we're hoping that the board can move forward these plans. Because we want to break ground in the summer of 17 on some project. If we don't get consensus and are able to adopt some kind of a plan, that date pushes out and no one gets to start. So that's just the reality. And so we're hoping to get some consensus. There could be some things that get moved around, but ideally, we're hoping to get people with nodding yes. We think it's okay, because otherwise, we're looking at starting projects in the middle of the school year or not till the summer of 18. That's just the reality. So, here we go.
So there are tables in the back, and we'd like you to make groups up here with chairs, and we'll come around and give you these scenario handouts. You'll have 15 minutes to review these.